Soften, relax all the muscles of the body around it. See if you can tune into a balance of this uprightness and relaxation. Feel the jaw and give some extra emphasis towards softening, loosening, relaxing the jaw. Feel the cheeks of the face and have them join the jaw in softening, loosening, relaxing. Feel the forehead and the temples and have them join in this softening, loosening, relaxing. Now feel the freshness of the in-breath and feel the calmness of the out-breath. And feel like this breath awareness surrounding it, around it, is this uprightness and ease. And as we feel the in-breath, feel the out-breath, further relax into the breath awareness. Fully feel the whole of the in-breath. Fully feel the whole of the out-breath. From the very beginning of the in-breath all the way to the end of the in-breath. Fully feeling the whole of the out-breath from the very beginning all the way to the end. See if you can feel like the awareness is riding the in-breath, riding the out-breath. Fully feeling the in-breath, fully feeling the out-breath, like painting when you stroke up and stroke down. The artist tunes into, feels, is deeply connected with every stroke of the brush. See if one can tune in to this connectedness with the breath. Fully feeling the in-breath, fully feeling the out-breath. See if one can stay connected for 3 breaths. In this breath meditation, having one single intention, one single purpose, to connect and stay with the breath. And if the attention moves, the mind wanders, noticing that, and with gentleness bringing the attention back to the breath. Imagining an emergency flashlight. One rotates it continuously and uninterruptedly. And as one rotates it, the battery charges and the light brightens. So too in breath meditation, each in-breath, each out-breath is like a rotation of the generator. And as one puts forth this effort to connect deeper with the breath, see if one can actually relax into that effort. Because when this effort and relaxation are balanced, we can develop a momentum of mindfulness, a momentum of samadhi. It just takes 1 minute. It only takes 1 minute of continuous breath awareness to take us into a little bit deeper state of being. As we fully feel the in-breath, fully feel the out-breath. It's like rolling a wheel. And appreciate the refreshing, rejuvenating quality when we give the breath our emphasis, our attention, when we allow the breath to fill our awareness, to fill our being. See how much one can get into that role, get into that momentum. As we come to the conclusion of the meditation, we connect with that sense of uprightness and ease. And as we open the eyes, see if one can stay connected with the breath awareness. Even with eyes open, the breath is with us all the time. While we're walking around, moving around, especially when not engaged in any particular conversation or work, it is truly possible to make our breath a home, a base for our awareness, for our being.
I want to thank everybody for your practice and mention that without the interdependence of mutual support, these precious teachings would not have survived the 2,600 years ago that the Buddha was walking on the earth. And we feel really honored to help carry on the teachings and this flame of the heart of the teachings, and are very grateful in sharing your joy in giving and ours in receiving. And I'd like to ask Margaret if you would come sit in my spot so that Robert can see you online. Can you hear us now?
I want to share something from the heart. As many of you know, this little Sangha keeps growing. Week after week, more people are finding their way here. Some arriving stressed, some grieving, some just needing a quiet place to breathe. And it's been beautiful to witness how this community holds them, the way a PNW forest holds everything that falls into it, gently, without judgment. To continue offering this refuge, we're hoping to take 2 extra steps. First, we offer another sitting group in West Lynn and hopefully move into a larger room upstairs at some point. Second, to offer fair support to our teachers who give so generously of their time and their hearts, including continuing bringing guest teachers. If this group has supported you, if it's helped you steady your mind or soften your heart, we invite you, only if it feels right to contribute to our Sangha building. Truly, no amount is too small. Every offering, even the cost of a cup of tea, helps us grow in a way that's sustainable and rooted in kindness. There's a donation bowl on the table, and you can also give online using PayPal or Venmo, or through a direct deposit through Zelle. You may also want to consider being a monthly donor on PayPal or Zelle. And if contributing financially isn't possible right now, please know that your presence here is already a gift. And we can always use volunteers to help set up the room, greet people, and take down tech equipment. Thank you for being part of this community. May our shared practice continue to ripple outward in ways we don't even see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. One of our kind volunteers. And I do want to mention that Trina will be back teaching next week. And the week after that, we have a visiting teacher who's been here maybe 3 times before in the last couple of years. She was the founder of Pine Street Sangha, and her name is Nellie Coffer. Some of you might have been here when she's been here. Her approach to the Dharma is called reflective meditation. And so it's a silent meditation, and then you have to bring a pen and paper, and you write some of your reflections from your meditation, and then there's discussion about it afterward and as to how it fits into the Buddhist teachings. And she's a lesbian. She's been married for 30 years, and her practice, because she's also a psychotherapist, she's very talented at sort of helping insightfully interpret what some of your writing might have been from your experience sitting. So she'll be here on the 13th, and then I'm teaching on the 27th. So I guess that's enough.
So this evening we'll be finishing a series that's been happening on the Noble Eightfold Path that's been led by Kendall. And for this conclusion to it, we'll be kind of going over the Noble Eightfold Path as a whole. And I'll be connecting with, it's called the Great 40 Sutta. And in that sutta, it talks about kind of the first seven factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, how kind of the development of those result in Samma Samadhi, right unification, right gatheredness, resulting in knowledge and liberation. And connecting with right view. It's truly the forerunner and the locomotive of the Noble Eightfold Path. The right view is there's suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and this is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. So it's these Four Noble Truths. And when we connect and intimate with right view in our lives, it's kind of a total reorientation, reprioritization for our life. Because so often we emphasize external things, like people, places, things. Like what this person said, the events going on in the world. It's like the tendency of samsara is to pull us outwards towards the details. And with right view, when the Buddha emphasizes that the suffering that we experience within ourselves, when the Buddha is giving this emphasis as the first thing, it's like, this is what's most important. Like the news, the internet, media, society, corporations, is always trying to tell us that everything else is more important, yeah? But, when we get really honest and sincere with our experience, it's it's this suffering that we experience within ourselves. That's what we carry with us. That's what we walk with. And when the Buddha would simplify the teaching, he would say he only teaches two things: suffering and the cessation of suffering. So this suffering that we experience within ourselves and the untangling, liberating from it, right view is giving this emphasis and prioritization to this internal experience as we go through life. And when we intimate with right view, intimate with opening our eyes, opening our heart to awakening to the noble truth of suffering, like how this mind, our habits, inflict suffering upon our heart, then what comes forth from that effort, from that clearer seeing, deeper sensing of the nature of suffering, it starts to kind of like a seed that starts to sprout. Yeah, what starts to sprout forth from right view is right intention, which this word intention has actually, Sankappa has this meaning of like purpose, determination. So like in the yoga tradition, Sankappa is something like to make a determination, like to be more peaceful, or to be more kind of less anxious. Or, like when you do, what is it called? It's a kind of meditation where you lie down, yoga nidra. They often talk about sankappas, so it's like when you're in this restful state, doing these body scans and going into this half asleep, half awake state. They give this big emphasis on you arise a sankappa, like an inclination, determination, purpose that you want to align one's life towards. So as we develop and deepen right view, it's like kind of planting and nourishing this seed within our being. And what starts to sprout forth from that is these inclinations, these intentions, these resolves to align our lives towards what the Buddha would call kind of non-ill will, renunciation, and harmlessness. Because when we sensitize and see the nature of suffering, I'll bring in what I often talk about, but there's a humbling that comes forth from that. And when this humbling occurs, it kind of gives some more space, gives some more openness for our chitta, for our hearts, wishes, wholesomeness to start to rise forward. And inside of our core, inside of our heart, there's this goodwill, this harmlessness, this inclination towards simplification, towards kind of less, just less. And this intention for renunciation, this inclination towards renunciation, it's for this unburdening, for this lessening, because as we develop our heart, develop our being, like the more that we're dependent upon things, the more they kind of drag us down, burden our hearts, burden our beings, burden our minds. And this inclination of renunciation towards simplification is that as we lessen our dependencies upon sensuality towards external things, gives this potentiality for the heart to rise. Because our hearts, at their core, are actually like buoyant. There's a buoyant nature to our beings. And as we lessen the entanglement and dependency upon sensuality, it's like kind of like cutting off rocks off of like a balloon so that it can rise. And then as this intention, inclination, and sense of like determination towards wholesomeness, goodwill, simplification, harmlessness, then the next factor in the Noble Eightfold Path is right speech. So like right speech and right action. So as these intentions, inclinations start rising forth from the heart, we start to transform how we act, how we speak, how we relate with the world and engage with the world. Because as we give this reorientation, reprioritization, this right view towards suffering and liberation, it's like it transforms how we engage with people, engage with ourselves. And then right livelihood, right living, is usually described as like kind of the actual job that one does and the work that one does. But also like right living, kind of going with this flow, has this sense of that what you want to spend your time and energy on, you wish to actually support in your heart's development, in your spiritual development. Like, as this suffering and liberation becomes the priority of one's life, as we start to make space and kind of nourish the seeds of right intention to sprout forth in our heart, as we speak and act in ways that start to align with this wholesome inclination, it's like how we live our lives, what we engage in, what we invest in, we want to support in those sprouts growing into flowers. It's quite interesting in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta, it actually doesn't go into right effort, doesn't go into right mindfulness, but actually describes that the development of right view, right purpose, right speech, right action, right livelihood, it speaks about how right view, right effort, and right mindfulness actually like circle around each of these factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, with right view being the forerunner. And it speaks about the Noble Eightfold Path as like this kind of like transformational experience. So as one's going through one's life, it's like right view is also is associated with the quality of discernment, with wisdom. So it's like as we're going through our life, when we see qualities that are kind of dissonant with the Noble Eightfold Path, with this right view, discernment, one kind of like picks up on that, like, oh, this is like kind of dissonant. And actually going a bit deviating from that structure, in Majjhima Nikaya 61, the Buddha talks to his son Rahula, and he speaks about how the purification of karma, so karma is kind of like a charge or a residue that's left over on our being. So every action of mind, speech, and body leaves a residue or a charge. And the Buddha described this, I might have brought this up last week, but I love it, that this karma is like if you get a clay pot and you throw it down a lake, when it hits the bottom of the lake, unwholesome karma is kind of like rocks, so that it's like heavy and it sinks down, while wholesome karma is like butter that like rises has like a buoyancy to it. So as we go through our life, the clay pot's also the body. So as we go through our life, every action, every engagement that we have leaves this residue of either rocks or butter. And for these rocks that we have accumulated in our life, coarse or subtle, the Buddha, when he was speaking to his son, described that all unwholesome karma has been purified through repeated reflection. And he describes this process of essentially after, and this is kind of like an ideal, but essentially after every action of body, speech, or mind, one reflects, did that cause affliction or harm to myself? Did it cause affliction or harm to another? Did it cause affliction or harm to both? And that's a process of developing greater clarity and sensitivity. It's kind of like, like the game of Operation, when you take the little tongs and you're trying to get the bone out of the guy, and then you accidentally touch on the side and then the nose goes off. So this development of the Noble Eightfold Path, this aligning deeper and deeper to wholesomeness, is kind of like this game of Operation. But we kind of have like rusty tongs. So it's like we're kind of like hitting it, and the guy's kind of, his buzzer's going off, but you don't really get the shock from it. So this development of the Noble Eightfold Path, especially of the first 5 factors, is like, we're kind of like looking with our kind of rusty tongues to start to actually notice when the guy's red nose is going off. And there's a lot of things that it can get very subtle, how the ways in which we cause ourselves or others affliction. And also there's many ways in which we have normalized certain habits or conditionings that kind of feel like no big deal. That's like a really kind of thick, rusty part on the tongues. It's like when that's actually like chipped away or cleared away, it's like, oh, whoa, no, that's definitely causes a shock. The Buddha even has these metaphors in the sutta of like everything being fire. Like the eyes, the ears is like fire. So the development of the Noble Eightfold Path leading towards liberation is this development of sensitivity towards, first off, the karma that we're making, and whether that's kind of causing a heaviness, a burden, or sluggishness, or agitation to our being. And like getting really into it. It's like, it's quite interesting. And there's actually, it's called a big jump. So there's like a lot that can be done. Because essentially, what that sutta starts to refer to is that as we make this right view, right effort, and right mindfulness, which is kind of like the observing quality in that process, like remaining present, connected with each thing as one develops it. Right mindfulness also is a quality of like with the right view, right effort, purification process, cleansing process. Right mindfulness also is a quality of like remaining in that, in which one has developed. Because it's like we can have insights or have experiences in meditation in our life or in our lives when we kind of come out of an unwholesomeness or a hindrance or an entanglement or come into connection with kind of a sense of goodwill, a sense of clarity. But it's kind of easy to lose that, yeah? So right mindfulness is like kind of staying connected or staying present, staying within the wisdom or wholesomeness that we've discovered in our practice. And the practice can kind of be related to like digging a tunnel. So it's like, when we had an insight, when we had this experience of like the Brahma Viharas, of goodwill, of compassion, it's kind of like, it's like kind of going a bit more deeper into our being. But yeah, the reality is that it's kind of easy to get covered over. It's easy for that to get obstructed. So this development of mindfulness, of presence, of alertness in our lives is kind of like developing the structure around this deepening so that we can stay in deep, like greater and greater depths of our being as we develop the Noble Eightfold Path, as we spiritually develop. Because the spiritual path indeed can become this kind of process of we kind of make effort and then we have experiences, but then we get back into kind of a superficial or habitual way of going through our lives, and kind of like the tunnel collapses, and we kind of lose access to that clarity or to these deeper dimensions of wholesomeness of our being. So right mindfulness, again, is this like developing a presence, kind of a foothold into these things that we tap into as we, and that we access as we develop the Noble Eightfold Path. So it describes like right view, right effort, right mindfulness as being this circle. So if we kind of continue this metaphor of like kind of digging, it's like right view is like, oh, okay, this is like a rock. Right effort is kind of like getting that rock off. Right mindfulness is kind of like entering into that state, present in it. And then when you're in that, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. So it's this process of making space, developing space within our being. And actually, the tunnel metaphor is imperfect, because the Buddha described in so many places that our chitta is drowning. He described it as like a person in the ocean, underneath the water, drowning. He described it as someone in the mud, like a sink pit, and like trying to get out of the mud. And that's where this word like defilement, yeah, it's like a dirt that is on our heart. And this dirt kind of surrounds and covers the chitta. And so this right view, right effort, right mindfulness is kind of like trying to get some space. It's like we're in a very crowded room. When you meditate and the mind has all these thoughts and imaginations kind of endlessly, incessantly, compulsively. This is like being in a very it's like if this room was just filled with things, top to bottom, all over one. So this is kind of the mind that tends to its proliferation. It's just like a lot of stuff everywhere. And when we kind of connect deeper with our heart, it's like, whoa, it's like very constricting. Very constricting. So this right view is like, oh, okay. It's like, and it's kind of dark in here, yeah? It's kind of like a dark space. We don't really know exactly what we're in. There's just a lot of stuff. So this right view is developing this kind of discernment, this kind of clarity of like, oh, okay, this is okay. And right effort is this untangling or this kind of removing of that thing to then create this spaciousness. And the Buddha describes as one goes through this process of right view, right effort, right mindfulness, and as one kind of abandons the unwholesome and develops the wholesome, that it actually naturally culminates in Samma Samadhi, right unification. Because ultimately, it's these entanglements and this kind of like negativity, these kind of residues of negative karma that keep us disconnected with our heart, keep us disconnected from the goodness at the core of our being. And little by little, as we run this marathon, go on this journey of the Noble Eightfold Path, and when this goodness within our heart can start to peek its head out, there's actually a natural settling that comes forth from that. Like, as we find the goodness and brightness at our core, within our heart, appreciate it, intimate with it, connect with it, it kind of like naturally leads to a sense of unifying around it. And this quality of right effort is, again, giving this orientation of what's really important in our lives. So when the Buddha described right effort, he described it as a rising of wholesome qualities, developing of wholesome qualities, the stopping of unwholesome qualities that have arisen, and then kind of not having them rise again. And as we intimate with right effort in our lives, it's kind of like the quality that we bring to our experiences is also the priority. Because so, again, it's like the details tend to encompass us, yeah? But then at the time of death, or even actually just 1 year from now, 2 years from now, like how much do you actually remember what happened on this day 1 year ago at this time? Like 5:50 p.m. You just don't even know. What happened yesterday 1 year ago at 5:50 p.m.? Don't even remember, don't know. 0% memory. So it's like this trickery of samsara, trickery of Mara. Mara is kind of like a being that keeps one entangled in samsara and Buddhism. And it's like this trickery of samsara that what's happening right now is what's really important. But then we don't even remember anything. There's so little that we actually remember from our lives. And when we get towards the time of death, all we really end up having is the quality of our being. All we end up really having at the time of death is do you have that sense of goodness and that joy that comes from goodness within our heart? That sense of butter, a sense of light within. And it's when we are going through the flow of life, engaging internally with our own mind and body, engaging externally with people, with life, it's like the charge that we're generating in those experiences, the qualities that we're developing in those experiences, and the qualities and charges that we're kind of separated from, that are unwholesome, that ends up being all we have at the end of our life. The Buddha described this as like gold and dirt. So it's you're kind of he described it as like a gold washer. So you have a tray of gold nuggets. There's a bunch of dirt all over it. Gold washer has to kind of scrub it and shake it until the dirt kind of separates out, and then the gold is left on the top. And this gold the Buddha describes as our heart, as the chitta. So it's like, as we're going through life, are we pursuing money or are we pursuing the real goal? And when the Buddha describes samsara, he described it as like life after life. And it's kind of like a cycle of rebirth. And we definitely, very few people remember their previous life. It's kind of like this, everything's just forgotten actually in our life. And kind of what's left over is kind of like just like kind of charges. For instance, with past lives, it can be quite interesting. Like, if one has like a very strong reaction to something that feels very minor, that can be actually residues from like previous lifetimes. Like, for instance, I knew a monk who so he was a male, and he had watched a movie as a teenager or something that had like a kind of like an assault scene in it of a woman, and he like experienced like the greatest fear of his life. Like, it was one of the biggest sufferings of his life seeing that. And I was a bit confused because I do some of that kind of work with people. And I was like, how can that be the biggest suffering of your life? Like seeing like a scene in a movie. But as he kind of like tuned into it and like kind of meditated on it and went deeper into it, like just memories started arising from like previous lifetimes. So this kind of like residue or charge is kind of like all we have in this life. It's like all we take with us. So with this right view and right effort, so right view being suffering and liberation is like the top priority, and right effort being to realize that liberation from suffering, to reduce suffering, is the development of the wholesome and the abandonment of the unwholesome. And then that right mindfulness is just like staying in it, staying in it, going deeper and deeper into it, developing that kind of structures around it, so that we're not constantly kind of caving in, our heart caving in our spiritual development. Yeah, as that comes together, as this wholesomeness within the heart becomes more prominent, and as I mentioned last week, that pamoja, that sense of joy, starts to come forth from that wholesomeness, then, yeah, this kind of unification starts to occur. This kind of natural centering, gathering, grounding, unifying to the core of our being starts to occur. And as this unification increases, the Buddha described that the end result of that is this pure bright heart that starts to emerge, pure bright citta. And this pure bright citta, the Buddha described as like the basis for liberation. It's kind of like the phenomena that kind of liberates one's being from samsara. And even, not even in that most ideal form of like a fully unified, like a sun at the core of one's being radiating forth. But really that process can start to happen even when just that sense of goodness, one starts to feel it within one's heart. A sense of like innocence, goodness. The sense of goodness is like the beginning of that light starting to emerge, starting to brighten. And from that goodness, which is like an element of samadhi, the Buddha described that the Noble Eightfold Path results in jnana, which is like understanding. So as we uncover our hearts, nourish our hearts with the wholesome and kind of gather it a bit so that, we can actually feel it, that we can actually tap into it, enter into it, this kind of sense of understanding starts to emerge forth from the heart. And this understanding, the Buddha, said we have to do with the simple truth of suffering. So it's like in this goodness, so it's develop understanding. So it's like anytime we get overly involved and entangled with any internal or external experience, as we connect deeper and deeper with our heart, it's kind of like you have like tentacles, like our heart has a bunch of tentacles. It's like when we get overly involved or entangled with an experience, there's like an innate kind of like, again, like the kind of like operation metaphor, there's an innate kind of like shock that comes with it. An innate kind of suffering, agitation, affliction, constriction that kind of comes with that. So it's like the development of samadhi is like we kind of gather within our being, and then when we leave the meditation, it's like a natural kind of thing that our being starts to kind of like kind of go out again, yeah? And when we develop this clarity and sensitivity of like, oh, okay, that's like, then this kind of sense of starting to withdraw starts to occur. That this tendency to entangle our being with the mind or with external experiences of sights, sounds, touches, smells, tastes. It's like our heart starts to withdraw from that and starts to become like separated from those experiences. So right understanding brings about this gathering and kind of keeping it gathering. So we meditate on the breath to gather our beings, but right understanding is what actually kind of like stops the asavas. The asavas are like the outflows or the effluents. And that word's kind of describing that there's kind of a force within our beings pushing us to get entangled with the mind, to get entangled with life. There's kind of these forces that push our being. And when the Buddha described coming to this understanding, he described it as like the chitta becomes liberated from the asanas. And when this force starts to kind of dissipate within our being, there's this sense of ease, this sense of and the tendency to get kind of for our energy to get involved and entangled with the six senses starts to diminish from this understanding. There's this like ease, this sense of control. And the word nibbana like literally means unbinding. I might have also said this before, but I said it again. But in Indian philosophy, when they talked about a fire, they viewed it as like there's kind of like a fire element everywhere. And when you start a fire, you're like kind of catching the fire element. And they would view it as kind of like this fire element's kind of like contracted onto that piece of wood that's kind of like caught on it. And then it's kind of agitated, that's why it's hot, because you kind of like caught it. And when you get the fire out, we saw that as like the fire releasing back into this kind of like ever pervasive element. And so when the Buddha speaks about Nibbana, he's speaking about this, he would use this metaphor about the fire going on. Kind of in modern Western interpretations, it's kind of like extinction, or to be extinguished. But Nibbana is actually just another word for liberation, for mukti, for loka. So, as this understanding brings about this diminishing of this force within our being, which another word for asanas would be the obvious one, the craving. As that diminishes within the being, is a greater sense of ease, a deepening sense of ease. And as that goodness in the heart gains more prominence, and as one through this development of understanding kind of develops this deeper and deeper easing into it, yeah, eventually it reaches this point where, as the Buddha described, like a rope on a dock, and as it rains and shines, that rope starts to deteriorate. And over a long period of time, eventually the rope snaps. That's the metaphor that the Buddha gave for liberation. So, as this ease and the goodness of the heart develops, and as like and that entanglement, reflectors, attachment, reflecting of that, more common, but together, like being like together, eventually reaching the point where it breaks. The heart experiences this liberation, permanent. The Buddha described the Noble Eightfold Path as leading to this understanding and liberation. The right view kind of gives this priority, reorientation for our life. Right intention kind of comes forth from our heart, from our being, as we start to intimate with suffering and kindness, intuition for liberation. Right speech, right action, right living, like how we transform our lives, how we engage with the world, with of intention, with liberation. Right effort is that emphasis on the quality that we bring to our experience, and that noticing of like the unwholesome quality that kind of like a trigger as we go through our experience. Right effort is like separating from those and noticing our wholesomeness and nourishing our wholesomeness. Right mindfulness is, yeah, just developing a presence. Right mindfulness is like a very big thing, but right mindfulness is developing a connection and a presence, like for instance with the body, like being mindful of every step, of every movement of the body, being mindful of the breath. And right mindfulness is what kind of like develops this deeper and deeper presence into our being. Right unification is just the natural result that comes about from the growth of the Noble Eightfold Path. And yeah, as our being unifies more, we kind of connect this power within our being, this life within our being, kind of look as we do with the light of wisdom. And the light of wisdom is ultimately what breaks the tattoos kind of bind on the heart to the samsara. So this whole talk, the Noble Eightfold Path, is essentially for orientation, because it's a very long journey, very difficult process. It's very like step-by-step process. So a talk like this is more to give a sense of orientation or a sense of direction. And like, why am I developing wholesome qualities? Like, why am I, why do I need to be mindful? So it's kind of like when we get the sense of orientation, when we get the sense of direction, when we get the sense of knowing, then the meaningfulness of every time we invest into our spiritual development, we get that sense of like, oh, we're getting one step closer towards that. That there are these profound potentials of our being. But there's like literally a sun in our heart. There's literally a radiance of the core of our being that is covered up, that is entangled, that is buried. And every time we make this effort towards abandoning the unwholesome, developing the wholesome, developing a bit more and more of mindfulness and presence with the body, we're investing towards that radiance within our being, becoming more prominent, becoming more free. This is your gratitude.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
We can just have some freestyle discussion, questions, reflections. Be about this, be about something different. Whatever you feel is meaningful in your life.
We have this microphone that we can pass around if something's on your mind. Let it face your mouth when you talk into it. Maybe you have some reflections on this talk or some thoughts about the Eightfold Path. Anybody feels like saying anything? This would be a great time to do it. Okay.
Thank you very much. I guess my first thought is, do I have to be a monastic to achieve this or have a hope of achieving this? But actually, last week, I think this ties in with what you're talking about today, the proliferation of thoughts, just starting at step one with sitting, clearing the mind, or getting to a point where I'm able to move through even the first step. And you talked about this technique with rowing and a short meditation, which I've kind of been practicing with a little bit. But I think you said that there's a counting technique maybe that you didn't go into, and I wondered if you could share about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. So yeah, to develop this like momentum of mindfulness that I was describing in the sitting meditation today. So essentially the story of how I came to actually this whole like momentum talk, speech, and emphasis is essentially it was like maybe 5 years into my like full-time spiritual path. Maybe like 4 years into my monastic life. And it was like 8,000 hours deep into sitting meditation. And I was a bit like kind of in this investigative mode of I didn't feel like I was really actualizing the potentials that the Buddha described and other spiritual traditions described as what can rise forth from sitting meditation. Like this description of like a rapture, tranquility, which is described as like very profound and very pervasive throughout the body. like not like a subtle, benign experience, but like a very like powerful experience. And I kind of felt like everything was like surface level. It was kind of like I had some experience that was regularly happening for quite a long time, and it just kind of only felt like at my skin level. So then I got like really curious and investigative of like, why is this happening? And I was really into Ajahn Nisro's technique of like whole body breath. So I was very like sensitive to like the flow of breath energy throughout the body, which is like chi or prana, which that's definitely not rapture as the Buddha described. It was really cool when I first experienced it as a teenager. But yeah, that's not quite actually like what the Buddha is describing there. And so I got like really curious and started investigating, and I kind of started from like the bottom level, and like kind of working on like an engine's not working, so I like took it all apart to like put it back together. And I came to realize through my study and implementation into this matter that it was a particular book that described like kind of many more stages of meditation than I was used to. And I read the book a few times, but I had like a little bit more humility reading it this time. And it described like stage 3 of the process was like you're aware of every in breath and every out breath. And I realized, oh, okay, that's what, like, I thought I was like stage 5 or stage 6 in that. And I was like, oh, okay, like, okay, so you're aware of every in breath, every out breath. So I went into my meditation and I realized I was not aware of every in breath and every out breath in the meditation. Like, I was kind of paying attention to like chi, sometimes the breath. I would have these nice contemplations about Dhamma, about Buddhism. So my attention was actually moving like a lot. And I kind of had a kind of chi experience with my whole body, which kind of gave me a sense that I was present, or that I was like kind of fully aware through the whole meditation because I had a kind of vibratory experience. And that was like totally not the case. Like when I started actually noticing the movement of attention, it was like going many places, and that I wasn't actually being aware of every in breath and every out breath, nor did I have that as like an emphasis. And I was kind of conceited because I kind of thought that was like too like simple for me. Like, you know, just like the air coming in, the air going out. Like I wanted more like energetic experiences or like the 5 khandhas, like, you know, 6 sense faces, like contemplating. Like I didn't really have the humility or the understanding of like why, like I wasn't convinced, you know, like the word sada means like conviction. So to have like faith and conviction in something, you need to feel really convinced that this is going to take you somewhere, yeah. And so I wasn't really convinced that like the air coming in, the air coming out, being aware of that would lead to deeper states of meditation. But then I reached a point that I was like humble enough to take it on. And yeah, I was a bit shocked actually when I realized that I couldn't be aware of every in breath and every out breath, like maybe 10, and then like my attention would move. So then I got like totally obsessed with it. And for like a month, I was doing 6 to 8 hours a day, like just trying to fix this problem. And there's a few things that I did to go about that, which was so first is this counting exercise, which essentially is a little bit elaborate. So it's like at the beginning of the in breath, you count 1. At the end of the in breath, 1. Beginning of out breath, 1. End of the out breath, 1. 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. And so you do 1 to 5, and then you do 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 8, 1 to 9, 1 to 10. So you like kind of like these rows. And also, if you want to get like really skilled in it, you actually just count 1 like quick, like like 1 at the very beginning of the in-breath and 1 at the end. To make it easier, you can go 1, 1, 1, 1, and that's what people can start with. But it's much more better for when you go into silent awareness of the breath if you kind of just do quick ones, because it kind of actually starts to connect you with the breath more than if you do the long counting. What you're going to find when you do that is, let's say you get up to row 1 to 7, yeah? So you're like 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say you're kind of halfway through that and you're like, am I on row 6? Am I on row 8? Like, why am I in this? And that is basically a sluggishness of awareness, because actually when there's clearness of awareness, you'll know exactly where you are the whole time. Without even thinking about it. You just kind of, there's like a natural sense of where you are in it. So then usually what I tell people and what I did is if that happens to you, then you have to start out 1 to 5. And essentially this exercise can really kind of like, it can create like a runway for your plane to take off into silent awareness of the breath. Because essentially if we can't even do that, like how many breaths are we actually aware of when you have silent awareness of it? It's like highly suspicious if one cannot do that. Like how much is one actually aware of the breath in the meditation? And yeah, it creates kind of like a runway, and then for like a silent awareness of the breath where your plane can take off. And for a lot of people, actually, one needs to do that maybe like 3 times. So like if those are kind of like rows, and 6 of those rows is 1 set, like 1 to 5 to 1 to 10. Then doing like 3 sets of that can then kind of set up the condition where you'll kind of stay with your breath, stay connected with your breath, and not get like swept away by a thought, or at least a period of time. And but this counting exercise kind of can start up that momentum, kind of like if you're like pushing a wheel along, and then kind of get it to a place where it starts to roll down the hill. And also something that really helped me with developing this momentum of mindfulness with the breath is actually to do out breath, in breath. And this is purely a perception thing. Like it's not like you're doing anything with the breath, but it's just starting with the out breath. Because normally we do in breath, out breath for awareness, yeah? Which is purely a perception thing. It's just where you start in it. But if you actually start with the out breath, it makes it easier to be aware of each breath, because the out breath is longer, it's more subtle. So that's actually where we tend to lose our awareness. So when we have the perception that we're starting with the in breath, and then the out breath is actually the more difficult thing to be aware of, it's kind of like we've lost our motivation by the out breath, and then that's where the mind can quickly drift away. So when you do the out breath first, it's kind of like you're like going down a slide, like a slow slide. And what happens is like the in breath is like super easy after you do it. It's like the out breath is like a long slide. Then the in breath is almost like you hit like a trampoline and it like bounces you up. And then you go down the slide again. Then the in breath is like a bounce. slide, bounce. And that can really kind of get into this momentum. And what ends up happening with in-breath, out-breath is you're aware of the in-breath, and then out-breath disconnected, interrupted, and then eventually you find your in-breath again. And then you can never get into this row, into this rotation. And also you can notice when you've lost awareness, because you'll be doing in-breath, out-breath, you'll notice like there's a shift of orientation back to that one, which means that one blanked out at one point. So it took like a long time for me to retrain myself to do out-breath, in-breath. And usually that's why I don't bring that up in like my guided meditations, because it's kind of like requires a bit of effort for that to feel like normal or comfortable. But there's also another benefit to the out-breath being first, which is our breaths are actually very weak in our modern lives. Kind of not being like hunters and gatherers and like kind of walking a lot and going through the forest, our respiratory system is much more weaker. So the awareness of the breath before, the breath would have been much more stronger actually. When you be aware of it, it would be much more prominent. And due to the weakness of our modern respiratory systems, the breath is kind of like weak and shallow and like indistinct. So when you emphasize the out breath, you can also have like a very slight intention for it to be like a full out breath. Also, the way that we relate to books and the computers and stuff also kind of makes us kind of constricted breathers. So also in the meditation, kind of like you push a rock down a cliff or something. So it's not like you are controlling the breath. It's like a very slight, subtle intention of like to have a full out breath. And when there's a full out breath, you'll notice that the in breath is just like really strong, very prominent. And then the breath has this kind of like, it gets you into this sense. And this isn't controlling the breath, but it's just when we actually allow or give kind of the emphasis for the out breath to be full, the breath like kind of feels stronger. And it can like more easily get one into a momentum of mindfulness with the breath. And also it's actually like healthy for the body to develop this as well. So yeah, that's my advice for developing a momentum of mindfulness in the breath meditation. So out breath, in breath, the counting exercise. And I would recommend, trying to do one set of it. And honestly, I would do the 1, 1, 1, 1. Like, it can get quite frustrating if one tries to do it. And if it's too difficult. Because it's so important in the development of meditation and in the development of momentum in the sense of flow in meditation, that if it's overly difficult, then it's like uninteresting. Like the way that athletes get into flow is that the thing that they're doing, let's say like running or a ball, catching a ball, the activity is simple enough, but kind of challenging enough that one gets into a flow. So there needs to be a sense of like simplicity, and it has to be kind of challenging enough to kind of get the mind to kind of like absorb into the activity. Yeah.
For me, it is always very natural and comfortable to be breathing through my nose on the in and out. And I'm just wondering if you breathe out of your mouth at all.
No, in and out of the nose, I would say, is primary for sitting meditation. Although I'm quite into also another thing to help with sitting meditation is before even the counting exercise. to do breath work, because also in our modern lives, and also just our tendency of our nervous system is we're actually kind of in fight or flight mode all the time. We're kind of like agitated, and like that restlessness, agitation is like the opposite. Imagine like at the time of the Buddha, or even like in Nepal, if you're just like a cow herder that doesn't have a phone, and what you do is kind of like walk cows around all day. Like the way that your mind works is quite different, yeah? Like you're not like analyzing, planning, concerning, trying to figure out everything. Like these kinds of people, also in Thailand, Asia, um, kind of like an ease to their being and the simplicity. So just for breathing out the mouth, so like breathing in through the nose and then breathing out through the mouth, and doing that for like 5 minutes. Um, and we're just so blessed with all these audio recordings that we have on like YouTube and stuff for breath work. It makes it much easier than doing it through your own like volition. It's much easier to just follow an audio where they're like in 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4. So following one of those audios, so breathing out of the mouth actually like really helps to regulate the nervous system. So actually, for a sitting meditation, I would recommend doing like 5 to 15 minutes of this actually intentional breathing work to bring about a sense of nervous system regulation. To then do the counting exercise with the out breath, in breath, and then a silent awareness of the breath. And even if you do that for 5 minutes of silent awareness of the breath, if one like sets oneself up properly, one just like really extracts much more from the meditation. So that's so for out breath, yes, sorry, time. Yeah, so yeah, let's just connect. Yeah, let's all just connect with a sense of Anjali, a sense of respect. And yeah, just let's breathe in, breathe out, connect with our heart. Connect with a sense of appreciation. Appreciation for one's own intention, wholesome intention to deepen one's understanding of the Dharma, spirituality. It's very wholesome, very bright intention. May whatever inspiration, sense of clarity comes about from this connection, may we all implement it in our lives. Get our hearts a little bit freer, a little bit brighter. Sincere gratitude to you all. I sincerely wish you all well.